Hello everybody on YouTube, hello everybody on Kick. This is streaming on Kick as well. Well, there's gonna be nobody on Kick at this point, but that's okay. I want to say hello to Pia, Brett is here, Martin is here. Hello Marisa, hello Jake, what's up? And Joe is here as well. I hope everybody is well. I'm a little cold today, and I'm so sorry I'm late. I just forgot to make myself a hot drink, and I knew I'm not going to survive reading out this much stuff without getting a drink. Yes, it's another reading stream. I'm so sorry to say to people who maybe this is not their cup of tea. Hello, the LTN. How are you doing as well? So this stream has been inspired by a premiere video that was released by Chris Bryant, PhD, talking to the Forget Veganuary campaign people, Tori, what was her last name? Giglietelli, I think, something like that, something Italian. I'm so sorry, I don't remember. And Tom something. What's up, Satanic Steven, I guess. Sorry. And it was an infuriating video, frankly. It was so infuriating that I think tomorrow, Patrick, Foolproof Mastery, me and maybe a few more people, I don't know yet, are gonna meet up and react to. We're gonna discuss this because quite a few things there made me absolutely lose my mind. But this one thing that they kept saying over and over again as people who are trying to, hello Bianca, trying to fall into the specific niche of inspiring non-vegans to do something for animals. They kept repeating, factory farming is bad, factory farming is bad, everybody wants to end factory farming. And we're going to react to that notion tomorrow, obviously as an abolitionist vegan, as somebody who spent about a year reading what homesteaders have to say about animals and how they treat animals. As somebody like that, I'm just like not understanding the specific framing of factory farming when quite often quite a few practices are actually worse on a small farm and in a small abattoir. And so I went searching a little bit to find the following article, right, that I want to read today. It's not too long, it's 23 pages, quite a few of those pages are citations. The person who wrote it is literally called Chad. So I had to. Anyways, this is what we're doing today. We're gonna read again, and you guys can ignore what I'm reading, just use me as white noise and discuss stuff among yourselves. But I'm gonna enjoy reading this article. It talks about, it's gonna give us a little bit of a history of factory farming and provide us with several points. Obviously, the ecological points are gonna be more prevalent here. The human welfare is going to be mentioned quite a lot. So this is not a vegan article by any means, but I think we should know more about this concept. If people keep repeating to us, not Alpha Karos obviously, because he's a piece of shit, but other people who strive towards being good, they keep telling us, yeah, factory farming is bad, but. And so I'm really trying to understand those people. I'm really trying to educate myself for those people. And obviously for people like Tori and Tom from FarmKind, who put their entire stock into this concept. Yeah, so we're just going to read up a little bit, all right? Okay, so I've got my previous drink right here. It's cold. I have my new drink right here. It's warm, but it's haven't brewed yet, so it's brewing. Okay, and yeah, so the name of the author of this paper is Chad Lavin, I'm supposing, and Factory Farms in a Consumer Society is the name of the article. And obviously, if you want the article, I'll give it to you. Actually, if you want to like read along, maybe I'll just give you the thing right now. So, originally conceived in response to the industrialization of American agriculture, the term factory farm became an increasingly popular metaphor. They're claiming it's a metaphor in American culture through the 20th century. I also found quite a few articles about factory farming in developing nations, but it seemed like less relevant since it seems to be originating the metaphor, as this person calls it, in America. I'm not trying to make a point out of like emphasizing the word metaphor. I haven't read the article. It's just interesting to me where how they're going to substantiate this claim that it's like a metaphor and not like an actual thing with criteria of what is a factory farm and what isn't, you know? While agriculture engineers could be heard using the term in heralding the efficiency and predictability of large and wisely managed farms, critics used the term to signal a threat to the more bucolic family farm. Bucolic, sorry. What's this word? I am not familiar with this word, I think. Bucolic. Of characteristic of the countryside. Okay, rustic. Family farm that evoked so many images of honest work, self-reliance, and national identity. Hey, it's gonna be a long stream, guys. Guess what? As a result, the metaphor quickly became pregnant with concerns about individual autonomy and national integrity that far exceeded the specific concerns of industrial farming. Okay. This essay examines the emergence and transformation of the metaphor of a factory farm in the 20th century, developed to describe a specific trend in agriculture organization. The metaphor today travels freely and is found in discussions of multiple domains of life, from industrial feedlots to white-collar workspaces, in retail outlets to individual bodies. This expansive use of the metaphor reflects the extension of disciplinary technologies to domains of life beyond those exemplified by the industrial workspace. In particular, technologies familiar from workspace management today extend to private and retail spaces, such that people are disciplined in their role as consumers as much as their role as workers. I argue that the metaphor calls attention to the powerlessness of citizen consumers under globalization, but then lends itself to a politics that calls upon those same citizen consumers to take responsibility for political change. It's gonna be interesting. I'm smelling no ethical consumption under capitalism. I don't know about you guys, but I think this article was from before that term was made, so 2009. I don't know. What's up, Waze? Wes. Okay. Brew, drink, you mean tea? Yeah, tea needs to brew. Tea needs to brew. What do you mean? It's the leaves should fall. I don't know if they're gonna fall in this little bottle, but the leaves are right here. And yeah. Okay. Down on the factory. Through the specific origin of the term factory farm, though the specific term of the factory farm is unknown, it certainly becomes noticeable in the first half of the 20th century. Sorry, I'm going to make this code much, much quieter. I apologize for that, guys. So sorry about that. Okay. It certainly becomes noticeable in the first half of the 20th century as the mechanization, division of labor, and intensified regulation of activities endemic to industrial manufacture begin finding expression on American farms. While today the term is used almost exclusively to critiques of agribusinesses, earlier usage was clearly more optimistic, heralding the potential benefits of applying the scientific knowledge of management and organization to farms. This is interesting stuff, says VPM, hoping that other people also find it interesting. From within the perspective of industrial progress, the factory farm promised greater efficiency, higher crop yields, and more predictable commodity market. As one agriculture engineer wrote in 1917, nobody will object to calling a farm a factory. It is a factory. The soil and the seed are the raw materials, and from these are manufactured a variety of finished products through the agencies of sun, air, moisture, power, and implements. The finished products of the farm factory are cereal, forest, vegetable, and fruit crops, and livestock products, are they not? It's interesting that the livestock themselves are considered a product here and not just the products coming out of them. That's an interesting choice of words. I bet there is something behind it. It was not always clear, however, what is terminological development signaled in terms of concrete agricultural practices. Writing nearly 3 decades earlier, economist Alfred Marshall offers a brief discussion of factory farming that suggests the transformation will be more quantitative than qualitative, obviously. Closing the section of his Principles of Economics that focuses on large-scale industry, Marshall writes, our knowledge on many disputed points would be much increased if some private persons or joint stock companies or cooperatives associations would make a few careful experiments of what have been called factory farms. Drink. Hello, Jason. From his hypothesis, however, it is clear that Marshall might just as well have said large farms instead of factory farms, since he proceeds to describe this new possibility as differing only in size, not in technique, from traditional family farms. Well, it must differ in both. When you increase size and the amount you produce, I guess it is possible to like put one worker on every 10 cows the way it is like, I don't know, in past tense small farms. Oh shit, I forgot the lights. One sec. What color do we want? There are many colors. Purple, blue, red. Let's go with green. Okay. Yeah, so the point is, I suppose you can increase while not increasing technological advancement. But can you actually, like, when you increase the number of cows, you must not just expand the facilities, you must expand technological prowess there. I don't know. He thus questions the feasibility of factory farms on three accounts. First, farming requires large pieces of land, and the amount of land required increases proportionately. Well, not proportionately, it decreases per thing created when you make a factory farm. Because surely, like, I think they include monocropping in here as well, right? As a factory farm thing. When you increase technique, you decrease the amount of land you need per product produced type of situation. To see it to say it bluntly. Among the land required increases proportionate, so I don't think that's proportionate, to the farm's productivity. Oh, to the farm's productivity, sorry. First, farming requires large pieces of land, and the amount of land required increases proportionately to the farm's productivity, to the farm's lack of productivity, maybe. I'm not sure what's going on here. Second, agriculture is dependent upon the seasons, which interferes with the aggressive investment of capital. Third, agriculture is not characterized by a division of labor as industrial manufacture is. A division of labor. Would that be true? I guess, I guess both farmers and farmhands, they all do the same. They all do all the tasks. I suppose that's true. Clearly, well, I guess artificial insemination, there's only one person that needs to know how to do that. Clearly, Marshall was mistaken about each of these limitations. I don't know if that's too clear, brother Chad. With regard to the inflexibility of land use, the natural limitations on crop density arising from soil fertility and threats of parasites have been largely overcome with the development of industrial fertilizers and pesticides. Soil management, crop rotation techniques, and the introduction of gasoline-powered farm equipment, allowing farms to grow commodity crops on land formerly required to raise fuel for working livestock. Okay. Fuel. Oh, yeah, to raise fuel. This is silly stuff, right? Like, I know I'm being pedantic, but it's just like, if you want to be understood, Chad. So raise fuel for working livestock is a silly, I guess maybe Chad is not a native English speaker. So the word raise is usually describing like an animal, or and obviously a human being as one. But when you, in this case, I think fuel is meant crop production, right? To grow commodity crops, right? To grow feed for working livestock. So raise is the wrong word to use there, but that's okay. Being so pedantic, Jesus Christ. Have also increased the productive potential of discrete parcels of land, which regards to seasonal restrictions on farming, developments in irrigation, insulation, and air conditioning allows farmers to create isolated ecosystems, manipulating both animals and crops to grow in response to artificial calendars. Finally, industrial harvesting today utilizes the same division of labor, evident in more conventional assembly lines, though with the difference that it is often the worker on a tractor that moves down the line of stationary products. These developments that Marshall did not foresee arose in large part from systematic attempts to bring the principles of scientific engineering to bear on American farms. Indeed, animal farmers consider themselves a bit of a scientist, I think, falsely, in my opinion. Attempts that coincide with the development of new disciplines of academic and professional knowledge, today known as agricultural engineering. In her study of U.S. agriculture in the first 3 decades of the 20th century, Deborah Fitzgerald, 2003, details the rise of academic attention to farm practices coming out of the newly established land-grant universities. Agricultural engineers, represented in American Society of Agricultural Engineers, agricultural economists, working primarily with government to develop wise agricultural policies, and farm managers, working with farmers to maximize efficiency, transformed not only the size of farms, but also how the activities would be organized on them, promoting intensified attention among farmers to bookkeeping, efficient land use, and climate control. These managerial and scientific developments owing less to the decisions of individual farmers to industrialize than to an economic imperative to compete with the recently collectivized Soviet farms on the international wheat market, provoked the first major shift towards factory farming in the US. Okay. So interesting. So there is a little bit of a competition there as well that moved this along. These changes also provoked the second, which is weird, as far as I know, Russia doesn't grow much food at all. These changes also provoked the second, I guess they did back then, maybe. I know very little geopolitics, not my thing. These changes also provoked the second significant shift towards the factory model in US farming, capital concentration. Because investing in these technologies requires large quantities of capital, this period saw banks becoming more directly involved in family farms. As industrial technologies lend comparative advantage to larger farms over smaller ones, the period saw mergers and expansions of farms along with larger and more numerous mortgages on the growing farms. So they basically merged like a bunch of farms sitting next to each other, they merged together to get a better mortgage, I guess. Closely followed by drought, economic downturn, and war-induced labor shortages, this consolidation led to what is known as the farm crisis in 1919, with numerous farm foreclosures and much of the agriculturally friendly Western land coming under the ownership of banks rather than farmers. Though this systematization and financialization of farming largely took hold in the pre-war period, the third major shift to factory farming did not emerge until the middle of the 20th century. The recovery of antibiotics in the 1940s and their relatively quick introduction into the agricultural community helped to overcome one of the primary obstacles that Marshall identified with regard to the inflexible demand of land. Prior to this development, the dense concentration of livestock, now common to the industrial feedlot, was simply impracticable. There's that word that we never see anywhere else except for in the vegan definition. Impracticable. We're gonna have to continue after we see this picture by Sue Coe, who also drew the picture that I used for the thumbnail today. So this is called feedlot. All right. I hope she doesn't sue me for copyright. So the dense concentration of livestock, now common in industrial feedlot, was simply impracticable, as it proved to invite widespread animal epidemics that could quickly destroy a breeder's entire inventory. Oh, what a life being called an inventory. Why can't you call in? Such a fucking asshole. Such a fucking asshole. Bro, every other stream, I'm inviting you to call in. You coming in on the one thing that we have like for ourselves. And you asking why you can't call in. Get wrecked. Okay, widespread animal epidemics. Right. As with human communities, this is maybe worth, yeah. Widespread animal epidemics, yeah. Or as with human communities, disease spreads at exponential rates as populations grow more dense. These encounters with infected animals become more frequent and sedentary. Pia, you have my permission to time out 120 if he mentions hunting or eating corpse. Okay? So keep your eye on 120, please. Or whatever. 1204, whatever. Disease spreads at exponential rates as populations grow more dense. These encounters with infected animals become more frequent and sedentary, since this means living in relative proximity to large quantities of urine and feces, which is the #1 production of animal farms, as we all know from previous discussions on this matter. Finally, antibiotics allow livestock to endure dietary regimens that tremendously accelerate their growth, allowing ranchers to bring animals to maturity and slaughter weight more quickly, and thus increasing the turnover of their inventory. Again, calling sentient animals inventory. Of course, despite the optimistic and triumphal rhetoric of agricultural engineers, let me see that you can see it. Yeah. This organization, concentration, and medicalization of farming did not occur without criticism. Fitzgerald chronicles popular disenchantment with factory farming from its earliest days. That's why it's so well known to the corpse munchers. I personally had no idea nor care when I was a meat eater where my meat came from. Did not hear about factory farming, did not give a shit. With common concern being voiced that factory farming poses a threat to the moral as well as economic health of the nation, displacing family farmers and homogenizing the mythologized American West. This critique is still visible today, but it is increasingly rare and unwieldy. But this gives me a little bit of insight. When people say factory farms are bad, maybe they don't mean the animals at all. Maybe what they mean by this is factory farms destroy small farmers. Thus, that makes more sense in a person who pays for exploitation and slaughter of animals to care for the farmers rather than the animals. Since the situation is of displaced family farmers parallels that of many putatively anachronistic professions in today's economy, questioning how farmers have fared in the transformation from human to an industrial agriculture typically entails questioning the logic of industrial capitalism itself. So, for example, when Eric Schlosser, I think, links the industrialization of cattle farming to high bankruptcy and thus suicide rates among American ranchers, he also shows how market pressures have reduced ranchers, those embodiments of American autonomy and rugged individualism, to the identified servants of our market meatpacking firms. Similarly, in studying the economics and operations of an industrial feedlot, Rachel Pollan chronicles how ranchers must violate their tradition, their conscience, and the principles of economic self-determination in following the demand of corporate meat processors to inject their animals with large doses of hormones and antibiotics. There is the farmers love their animals myth again. We meet again. I didn't mean that as a, you know, I didn't mean we meet as an M-E-A-T. I didn't. Never mind. Subsistence hunter. Why are we quoting a plonker like that? Subsistence hunter. Who cares? Okay, well, I guess the quote exists. Let's read it. Jesus Christ. Subsistence hunter Richard Manning laments that his grandfather was in the last generation of farmers to have independence before it got traded away for efficiency. Echoing the concerns that Fitzgerald chronicles from a century ago, these arguments find the American rancher, a figure second perhaps only to the cowboy for its investment in American identity and authenticity, subject to the dictates of international corporations. Factory farming is, in other words, un-American. And yet, most animals, most farms in America right now, 99% in fact, are factory farms. Okay, this is an interesting drink. It didn't really, the UC leaves didn't drop. They're sticking around on top, so it's warm water, which is also good. Okay. And now I have a leaf stuck between my teeth. There you go. Sorry about that, guys. Such wide-reaching critiques of industrialization and capital concentration, however, have rarely been more than marginal in American politics. As such, it is probably no surprise that the metaphor of a factory farm rarely extended beyond the literature of agriculture engineering until the 1960s, when the shifting technologies of animal husbandry pursuant to the discovery of antibiotics and the increased use of chemical pesticides, reinvigorated concerns with animal welfare and industrial pollution. Since then, critics of factory farming have paid less attention to the economic well-being of farmers, both as individual citizens and as the symbols of American autonomy, instead focusing on more fashionable issues of ecological sustainability and ethical awareness. This ecological trend begins with Ruth Harrison in 1964, who opens her path-breaking animal machines by introducing readers to a new type of farming that applies to production line methods to the rearing of animals. Though Harrison frets that animals are being treated as mere food converting machines, when did they ever not? And her position is couched in the rhetoric of justice and animal rights. Well done, Ruth Harrison. She ultimately focuses less on animal welfare and more on economical issues of contamination in the industrial food supply. Modern techniques of farming ensure the contamination of food right from its beginning, she declares, with industrial food processing increasing the poisons, pesticides, preservatives, dyes, and decreasing the nutrients or in our commercially available foods. Well, is them being commercially available is the pinnacle of factory farming, surely. Intensification of livestock rearing has simply taken all these hazards a stage further, she continues, and in my opinion made the food a definite danger to consumers. Well, that's just like an assumption. I don't know, maybe in 1964, but today we have pretty good food regulations. Maybe not in the US anymore. I'm sorry to say. To all my American friends, wish I could harbor you here on Mars. In short, unhealthy animals cannot make healthy food for humans. Harrison, in other words, uses the metaphor of a factory farm to convey a general ecological concern about industrialization. Her criticisms apply freely to industrial water and air pollution. Meat is but one very visible manifestation of the threat. So a few good things, a few bad things about Ruth Harrison here. Some of those things that just don't cash out, right? Like, yes, air and water pollution probably is more prevalent because the amount is increased. But in case of animal farming, for instance, air and water pollution would be greater if extrapolated to the amount of food that we are accustomed to today, or at the least be the bloody same. I guess there is something to say. Maybe in the past there was a much bigger difference between a small farm and a factory farm, because today, even if you like, most homesteaders use commercially available food for animals. Most homesteaders, they're probably not going to inject antibiotics, but they are going to give antiparasitics. They are going to use some kind of form of pesticide, even if those are natural pesticides when growing their crops. The natural pesticides are sometimes worse for the environment and for the human beings around than the Roundup and all of that stuff. Like sometimes vinegar is used as a pesticide, and that has a much greater toxicity risk to human beings and animals, other animals obviously, than Roundup. So, yeah. So I guess we can't actually criticize Ruth Harrison because we don't know what small farms looked like back then. By way of ethical critiques, the high watermark would have to be Peter Singer's 1975, The Utilitarian Animal Liberation. But nice of Chad to mention, I guess, animal rights at all, I suppose. So that's interesting, right? That it's mentioned at all. Avowedly utilitarian and, yeah, he knows. And brusquely vegetarian. I don't know that word. Singer argues that management techniques such as assembly line methods and issues of scale have transformed agriculture into agribusiness, and animals into machines that convert low-priced fodder into high-priced flesh. Singer speedily deploys the factory metaphor through this book, describing how chickens are transformed from farmyard bird into manufactured items. A hen becomes an egg-producing machine. They are indeed by farm literature are called unit of production. Till today, I think, unless what I'm thinking about is reading a slightly older literature, but it would have been around Singer's time, definitely. Maybe today they're not using that anymore, or using it less, more sparingly, but definitely was considered unit of production, any animal. And an efficient way to turn feed into eggs. A pig becomes a living reproduction machine, a valuable piece of machinery whose function is to pump our baby pigs like a sausage machine. A little, very descriptive from Singer. I haven't read his Animal Liberation. I haven't read that. I don't see a reason to. But this is a little very descriptive, not very objective, I suppose, which is fine, right? I'm just like, I was expecting something more precise. A dairy cow is a carefully monitored, fine-tuned milk machine. So it's like a... Never mind, I'm not gonna make that kind. The industrial meat supply, Singer argues, arises from barbaric, if technologically savvy, treatment of animals, and consumers are more or less directly implicated in this barbarism. I would agree with that one, supply and demand. I would say more or less directly. I would say there is a degree of separation when it comes to consumers. But the point I was making yesterday on my stream is that those two entities, the farmers and the consumers of farming goods, they feed each other. And by that, I mean, they point the finger at each other. A farmer points a finger at the consumer saying, well, I'm producing food for that guy, or for those people, for the entire nation, for the entire world. Farmers consider themselves heroes. And the consumer points at the farmer and says, you should treat animals better, while also giving him money for whatever treatment the farmer does. Yeah. The common theme of these critiques, similar to others of industrial life, is that the pursuit of efficiency causes great harm to people, animals, and the environment. At the same time, critiques of factory farming frequently demonstrate how recalcitrant... No idea what this word means. This one, I want to know. What do we mean? What is that?
Recalcitrant.
Recalcitrant. Why didn't you read it out in the UK accent? Stubbornly resistant or defiant of authority. Okay. Synonym obstinate. Okay. The drive for efficiency is by simply inverting rather than troubling or rejecting the industry's claims. I need to read this. At the same time, critics of factory farming frequently demonstrate how recalcitrant the drive for efficiency is by simply inverting rather than troubling or rejecting the industry's claims. Jeremy Rifkin, I think, or Rifkin, I'm not sure, for example, attributes the profitability of large-scale beef production to federal land grants, with industrial ranchers receiving 30 million acres of public land free of charge and another 300 million acres at 20-25% of its market value. That's insane. They got the land for free, or basically for free. Richard Manning calls factory farming a living continental scale monument of Rube Goldberg. Rube Goldberg, if you don't know, it's that machine when one thing falls, triggers another, and so on and so forth. One action moves an object, which then triggers another action, and so forth. a system cloaked in efficiency claims that are only defensible so long as one does not account for increasing reliance on federal subsidies, fossil fuels, and tolerance of environmental runoff. This move is surprisingly evident in even the most sentimental and wholesome attacks of big food. Though Francois Mo's Lapis Colonial revealed diet for a small plant, I butchered that shit, no worries, is largely an indictment of supermarkets and processed foods for inhibiting the natural and authentic lifestyle so stereotypical of Berkeley's transplant of her period. I don't know what that means. It does not argue against the pursuit of efficiency, but instead that meat-based diet is inefficient, requiring 16 pounds of grain to produce 1 pound of beef. Livestock is a protein factory in reverse. What a fantastic claim. And it's absolutely true, only in some cases it's 25 to 1, right? So 25 pounds produce 1 pound. Similarly, John Robbins in 1987. This is citation 70. I'm just gonna write it down into the chat because I wanna potentially read that shit. Citation 70. Yeah, let's add more to my reading list that I haven't touched in a while. Okay. Similarly, John Robbins argues the popular vegetarian manifesto diet for a new America, that factory farming is a drastically inefficient use of our acreage. Even Peter Singer gets on the efficiency train, casting veal less as a moral abomination and more as a sheer waste of calories. Oh, Jesus Christ, Singer, what have you done? Such arguments focus less on the dehumanization and myopia endemic to a blind pursuit of efficiency and more on the mechanisms, regulations, and calculations that allow such uneconomical practices to look profitable on crude balance sheets. Whether they reject or merely invert the value of efficiency, each of these critiques speaks to a generalized anxiety about the possibilities for freedom and self-control. The ecological critique does not merely raise concerns about environmental stewardship. It notes that with a corrupted food supply, individuals have lost the ability to decide which pollutants and toxicants they will ingest. There is that thing again. As far as our ability to study this, and it's been an extensive ability, there are no bad health outcomes coming from pesticides on crops, or for that matter, whatever we inject into animals. I'm not familiar with it, at least the latter. I'm not familiar. The ethical critique does not merely exploit images of animals suffering in support of vegetarian agenda. It insists that the opacity of commodity markets severely limits the ability of consumers to buy products that live up to their own ethical codes. The economic critique does not merely raise concerns about worker exploitation, it calls attention to how both producers and consumers are coerced by market imperatives to engage in practices they would otherwise find repellent. Each, in other words, attempts to demonstrate how the pursuit of agricultural efficiency prevents workers, owners, and consumers from living on their own terms. I need to think about that for 1 second. What do they mean by that? I mean, I know what they mean by that. But okay, this is interesting. On their own terms. When were they ever? Is what I'm thinking. Now we at least have faulty, right? Not perfect, but some regulations on what goes into the supermarket, right? With guidelines that tell you which foods you should limit and which foods you should consume more of. So I would argue today a consumer has the most amount of access to knowledge, the most amount of choice, because there is so much abundance. So I'm not sure what they mean by that. If the only thing they mean by that is that people don't grow their own food anymore, as whatever food they want to grow, I would argue that's a good thing. But that's me. Like the absolute dumbassery that I've seen in homesteading. Those people are like actually likely poisoning themselves under the guise that they do know what goes into their food. They do have certain terms that they apply. Very interesting stuff. It's been an hour. We're only on page 8, so we're definitely not going to finish this today. I'm definitely going to continue next week, but we're going to read out a little more. Okay. Of course, these economic, ecological, and ethical critiques are not mutually exclusive. In fact, they often converge when considered in the broader context of global politics, as, for instance, when Michael Pollan endeavors to link the ecological, ethical, and economic concerns about factory farming to key political decisions orbiting around the Cold War and current situation in Iraq, which is 2006, examining the history of a singular crop, corn. Pollan details how Nixon's 1972 attempt to best the Soviets by offering vast subsidies to corn farmers fundamentally changed American agriculture. I've already heard this argument. How many pages? 23 altogether, but a lot of that are citations. So we're going to read another 2 or 3 pages, and then we're going to disperse till the next time. Guys, before I forget, I should have said that like 20 minutes ago, but were more viewers. Please hit like on the stream and put 1 in the chat if this is like interesting to you in any kind of way. Put 2 in the chat if you would prefer me to find a different stream venue and do stuff that are more fun or something. Appreciate. Encouraging farmers to plant their fields fence row to fence row. This policy provoked a vast overproduction that remains to this day, and that has resulted, Pollan argues, not only in tons of wasted corn and depleted soil. That guy, no, he's not going to debate me, Alpha Karas. He's running away from me. He walks away and makes his own like videos rambling about hunting and shit. But in a vibrant industry, by the way, he beat the bullet that you usually bite, that if it was legal, it would be okay to hunt human beings. But then he started coping about it. A very confused individual. He doesn't want to debate me. He just likes to make sure that I know that he wants to, but he's never successful about it. I do run Alpha Karos 2 streams a week in which I invite people to debate me. And this guy has been coming for the past 2 weeks or so. So he had 4 opportunities or 4 segments of opportunities to do so. Yeah, I know, but you would bite the bullet on human beings. That's what I meant. But in a vibrant industry in finding new and economical uses for the cheap grain. As an artificial sweetener, as animal feed mostly, and as a binding agent in most processed foods, corn has become the sine qua non of the soft drink, beef, and fast food industries. And insofar as fast as uniform cornfields survive only with the heavy use of petroleum-based fertilizers and pesticides. Petroleum-based fertilizers are better for the environment than the shit. So there is like a little bit of an assumption there on Chad. He reads the US military presence in the Middle East as an unspoken subsidy for these industries, a subsidy that has allowed hamburgers and soft drinks to grow increasingly larger while maintaining remarkably stable retail prices of around $1 each. As a final cost, insofar as corn overproduction allows junk food and soft drinks to retail for less than fresh produce and milk. So I told you, this is not a vegan person. Pollan argues that the true cost of corn overproduction would have to include the increased healthcare expenditures stemming from rising rates of obesity and type 2 diabetes. I mean, maybe indirectly by the fact that junk food is cheaper. Is that what he's arguing? I hope he's not arguing that corn in itself increases the risk of diabetes, because I don't think he would find evidence for that, right? That would be like an ecological association. Would be silly to assume anything from that. Arguments like this locate the stakes of the factory farm debate well beyond the treatment of crops and animals, linking obesity to the Cold War and fast food to Iraq. Pollan suggests that all manner of apparently free choices are traceable to the economic and technological organization of agriculture. Farmers are the first casualty in Pollan's work. They mistreat animals and work against their own economic self-interest because they are coerced by agribusinesses. Consumers hardly fare any better. Their health and lifestyle arise not from freely developed preferences about diet and exercises, but from the arbitrary availability and exploitability of particular foodstuffs. If RFK was a serious person, and if he actually cared about people, he would not reverse the pyramid. He would reverse the subsidies and take away the subsidies from the beef producers and the dairy producers, although dairy is healthy, so if he cares about health, he probably should leave it there. As a vegan, of course, I oppose, but at least take away the subsidies from the beef industry and give it to the fruit and veg people, and take it away from the corn, because surely that's not the best crop to grow anyways. Those subsidies are his paycheck. Yeah, that's what I said. I don't know that. I haven't checked that, but like I wouldn't want to assume what his financial incentives are. I'm just saying if he would be serious about public health, I think that would be something worth implementing. Yeah, reverse the subsidies, not the pyramid. Pollan finally attacks the logic of national self-determination, rooting domestic and international policy not in the representative will of overpopulation, but in the overwhelming imperatives of global food markets. In this argument, the spoils of factory farming are not only a breached ethical covenant with animals and unsustainable agricultural policy, but also a subordination of human life itself to a corporate pursuit of efficiency. In Poland's hands, the factory farm metaphor upsets the familiar myths of freedom and self-determination from American ideology, placing the American individual in a set of relations no less managed than the aesthetically pleasing, if ecologically devastating, crop monocultures that increasingly dominate the American landscape. Maybe the next thing we should look into is whether crop monoculture is as devastating as this claims. Because I don't know about that. Maybe that's the thing that we need to check out next. Somebody remind me this at some point. Somebody write this in my Discord server somewhere, please. Otherwise I will forget. Let's read a little bit more. Who's afraid of factory farming? This is the interesting part, in my opinion, because what I came to this paper with is the question of why do the regular consumers always say that factory farming is bad while they themselves contribute to factory farming? I want to know why they say that, because I'm not sure I usually get a very good answer to that question when I do attempt to ask. Hey, what's up, Sabi Coops? Okay. What's up, Marcos, as well? The previous section shows how the metaphor still haven't actually substantiated his claim that this is a metaphor. So, Chad, I do wish there was a little bit of work there. Okay. Previous section shows how the metaphor of a factory farm came to capture a set of anxieties surrounding the development of industrial agriculture over the past century. But while the economic, ecological, and ethical critiques of factory farming, I appreciate whoever did that, I think that's somebody obliging me. Farming are certainly grounded in the specific intensifications of farming practices. They also have significant bearing on the development of other industries and lifestyles. As such, the form and content of these critiques soon traveled well beyond the realm of agriculture and evoked a broader trend in the social and political organization of the American landscape, consolidating concerns about the welfare of not only farmers, environmental sustainability, and animal rights, but also workers, consumers, and citizens more generally. By the end of the 20th century, the metaphor of a factory farm had taken on a life of its own and found its way into pop cultural artifacts bearing little relationship to food. That's an interesting claim. One sees the metaphor in narratives of white-collar alienation, such as Douglas Copeland's epochal novel Generation X. Haven't read it. Not much of a reader. In which moribund college graduates work in cubicles described as veal fattening pens. It also animates dystopian techno fantasies such as the Matrix films, in which human bodies are cultivated as biofuel for a post-human order, in which, as one character explains, there are fields, endless fields, where humans are no longer born, we are grown. only slightly less overtly. I didn't think of the Matrix as the metaphor for livestock. That is actually very interesting. For livestock and like monoculture, I'm supposing. The image, only slightly less overtly, the image of human beings as so many products of factory farms organizes allegories of race, imperialism, and capitalism, such as Octavia Butler's Dawn in 1987, in which human survivors of a nuclear holocaust are selectively bred with an alien race, like so much livestock, and Kazuo Ishiguro's Never Let Me Go, in which human beings are literally cloned and then harvested for their organs. There's this movie, a British movie that I liked very much, about this thing where people are sectioned, children are bred and sectioned off from all the population, and they are bred in order to become later in life organ donors. It's a fantastic movie. It's absolutely beautiful. This is worth reading, I think. Brett, you seem to be interested. Octavia Butler's Dawn. They're literally bred selectively with an alien race. There's a film of the book. Ooh. Worth maybe watching. The Promised Neverland, yes. Well, no. It wasn't an anime. The movie that I was talking about, it was a British movie, actual movie. Oh, you mean the Dawn one, yeah. Have to check out Never Let Me Go. I think that's the name of the movie. But I don't remember. I want to rewatch it now that I'm... Did I watch it the first time when I was a vegan? I'm not sure. But would love to rewatch it. Yeah, okay. Cool. Okay. Works like these mobilize the familiar metaphor of a factory farm to describe a mode of organization that far exceeds the operations of industrial agriculture. The factory farm works as what Lakoff and Johnson call a structural metaphor, a figure of speech that uses one highly structured and clearly delineated concept of structure to structure another. Okay. Such metaphors, they argue, are grounded in systematic correlations within our experience, and they achieve prominence in our language because they correspond to an experiential gestalt. Structural metaphors, in other words, do not felicitously or efficiently describe one aspect of our daily lives, but rather evoke a dynamic and extends to more general conditions of existence. In the movies and books mentioned above, the metaphor of a factory farm resonates with a sense of confinement and standardization endemic to contemporary society. Unlike earlier critiques of alienation and industrial life, in which workers were placed alongside or subordinate to machines, these narratives introduce the factory logic to the very organic operations of the body itself, and they use the metaphor to structure an understanding of various institutions, from work and school to mass media and global commerce. This is very interesting stuff. It provides what I was waiting for. I'm understanding more the opposition to factory farming now. Lakoff and Johnson Johnson's argument parallel to Mary Douglas's explanation of social taboos and expressing general preference for social order. The prohibitions on eating unclean animals in Leviticus, for instance, have little to do with hygiene or nutrition, but reflect an elaborate intellectual structure of rules that mirror God's covenant with his people. It also replicates Marx's critique of ideology. For despite the typical vulgarization of ideology as false consciousness, Marx does not argue that ideology is wrong, but that it can be explained by the material situation in which it takes hold. Ideology is, in a sense, entirely too right. What does that mean? Not sure. The Hegelianism that reduces individuals to the expression of an external force resonates with the material situation in which workers do not decide what they will do with their lives. An ideology of individualism makes sense under the material conditions of, here's that word again, human farming, in which individuals sustain themselves by their own labors, but is destined to be replaced by class consciousness in society characterized by an industrial division of labor in which survival depends upon regular cooperation. Structural metaphors like taboos and ideologies are rooted not in any particularly idiosyncratic institution or experience, but in the broad dynamic of the historical period. They work not by revelation, but by analogy. I didn't understand any of that, frankly. Like, something about Marxist language is always... but that's okay. The appeal of the factory farm metaphor does not come from its unique ability to describe a specific institution, but from its ability to capture an organizational logic that pervades the experiential gestalt of late capitalism. It evokes the sense that the organization of work, leisure, and politics compels homogeneous and impersonal anomic through useful interactions such that individual units pass rapidly, anonymously, efficiently, and systematically through a series of processes and emerge relatively indistinguishable from one another. The anxieties about imprisonment, surveillance, management, and exploitation that inhere in the metaphor have their bite not in the treatment of crops and animals, but in workers being housed and watched in cubicles. So I understand now why Chad says that this is a metaphor. I understand now. So it's not the treatment of animals. Who gives a shit about crops? Let's go. It's only being resonating with people because they do imagine themselves being in the positions of the animals. So, but they don't have the empathy for the animal. They just have the empathy for themselves in the animal's place. Am I understanding it correctly? That's a lot to think about. Like, that's interesting. Wow. In consumers being monitored and managed via data mining and niche marketing, and in citizens being tracked through government wiretaps and privately owned surveillance cameras, The books and movies just mentioned evoke a series of technologies and institutions that threaten conventional ideas of freedom in the social and political landscape of global capitalism, a landscape comprising such ubiquitous surveillance that the dominant theme in popular media, from reality television to Facebook, is voyeurism and such pervasive behavioral management that full 50% of Americans take at least one prescription medication every day. I'm not sure what this point is about. Well, I guess they mean big pharma bad. All right. Fuck, this is interesting. Holy shit, it's breaking my mind a little bit though. The books and movies just mentioned demonstrate an experiential gestalt in which concerns about coercion, alienation, and exploitation endemic to critiques of factory labor are felt across social life, allegorically and indeterminately, deploying the factory farm metaphor to describe the workplace, the economic order, the state, culture, school, or, as in the Matrix, merely the system. These works draw attention to the parallel logics structuring activities across the domain of social life. They thus find wide resonance not with pervasive concepts about industrial agriculture, practices which few of us ever encounter, and so can relatively easily ignore. That's fair point as fuck. But with the experiential gestalt of global capitalism. This is blowing my mind. This is beautiful stuff. Holy shit. I mean, nothing that we didn't know before, right? We as vegans have been watching these movies, these actual like metaphors, and we're like, this movie is talking about the animals. But no, it's talking about the humans, as if they were put in the place of the animals. Most people, all those creators, will not reflect on the fact that maybe if it's terrible, bad, anonymizing, unindividualizing human beings, then maybe it's also bad for the animals. Full circle. Beautiful. What's up? Some call me I'm enjoying this very much. It is probably no coincidence that the term factory farm became one of the derision in the 1960s. What is derision? Probably something bad. Derision, the act of ridiculing or laughing at someone or something. State of being derided, the act of... Yeah, okay. So became one of derision in the 1960s when critiques of mass society and technocratic rationality, exemplified by the Frankfurt School, were on everybody's plate. So it could be actually that the factory farm concept was used in several works of art and entertainment as a very profound metaphor on the unindividualizing, if that's a word, of human beings in a capitalist society. But today, possibly, that metaphor has lost its meaning and became actually, hey, what's up, Ben? About animals, because I think when I do ask people why factory farming is wrong, they do sometimes mention animals. But maybe the source of that factory farming is bad is actually in the consideration of humans and not animals. Interesting. Interesting as fuck. Spooky. That's funny. Okay. Should we stop? It's page 11. Let's finish this page and then let's... there is like very little to the end of this part. Today, the literature of globalization almost invariably invokes this gestalt. The refrain of globalization, by now familiar to the point of axiom, is that the mobility of information and capital threatens national sovereignty and thus individual freedom by subordinating the judgment of supposedly representative states of the dictates of international finance organizations and multinational corporations. When national solvency requires accepting the prescriptions of the World Bank and the IMF, I don't know what that is, when localities surrender the right to regulate trade and arbitrate disputes to the WTO, I don't know what that is, and when the persistent threat of capital fight allows corporations to effectively dictate national policies, laws appear less the expressed intersect of the territorially bound population than the codification of the interests of unrepresentative groups. Globalization, that is, calls into question the legitimating conceit of liberal governance, that the state facilitates freedom by ensuring that individuals live according to laws and they choose, albeit indirectly, laws that they choose, albeit indirectly. This leads theorists of globalization to ask whether we are losing control and whether there are any institutions that might offer uncountable governance to the absence of sovereign states. This is starting to read a little scary. In this literature, what is at stake is the very possibility of self-governance. As citizens shouldn't self-govern. As citizens become powerless pawns in the world controlled by corporate interests. I would argue, improve it, don't disprove it, because most people can't govern themselves. But yeah, maybe that's my dystopian view on human beings at this point. This gives context to the pervasive anxieties about powerlessness and coercion, and in the factory farm metaphor, Harrison's concern about the ubiquity of industrial poisons, Singer's concern about the ethical responsiveness of industrial farming, Schlosser's, I think, concern about ostensibly sovereign economic agents becoming little more than indentured servants of international corporations, Poland's focus on the legislative and economic roots of obesity and international war, and the concerns about institutional power expressed in Generation X and The Matrix. These all appeal to an anxiety about the ability to control the course of one's own life. The multiple and various articulations of the metaphor, in other words, resonate with the experience of powerlessness of workers, consumers, and citizens that is the dominant theme of discussions of globalization. This wide usage is emblematic of a structural metaphor that uses one highly delineated concept of structure to structure another. It is also emblematic, as I will discuss in the final section of this essay, of trends in food politics today, which endeavor to tie the most intimate of individual choices, what one puts in their body, to the most far-reaching issues of democratic control and environmental sustainability. Interesting. Not what I expected, frankly, from an article like this. I expected more of an overview of the concept itself, which we got, of course, the history. But very interesting to tie that into something larger than that, right? The lack of control that animals experience is something that is shared by human beings sometimes, a lot. 20 minutes chill, what does that mean? Yeah. So, guys, what do you think so far? Very interesting. If I can try to, well, I said it, but if I could try to summarize, the factory farming metaphor is possibly one more way to look at the actual factory farming of animals as a destruction of humans. We humans are made in the image and likeness of the animals of the earth. You have chosen a very nice topic again today. Yeah, no problem, but I don't know which one came first. According to this article and like as a historical timeline, I think humans were factory farmed first before animals. Yeah. Okay, guys. I think I'm really happy with my choice this week. So we'll continue to read the final part of this article next week on Saturday. Same time, same place. Be here or be square, whatever the people say. Tomorrow, we might react. I think probably I'm just waiting on a confirmation. Patrick and I, maybe a few other people will join in. We will react to the Farm Kind campaign people speaking out on Chris's channel. So that would be an interesting thing. Yeah. All right, everybody, thank you very much for coming. And I hope you have the best rest of your day, and I'll see you next time.